Big Gamer out here. How are you guys doing today? I'm super. Thanks for asking. Hey guys, welcome back. Today I thought we'd have a little bit of fun. So we're actually going to look through the E3 rumours and leaks that have come out so far, and then try to give them a rating as to whether or not we think this is actually going to happen come E3 next week. So first, let's look at Microsoft. They've been pushing Scorpio a lot recently, and will it be there? Well, that's 100%, that rating straight away. But what will it actually be running? Now, a lot of people are pointing towards Forza because we usually get a Forza every other year, especially from the mainline Forza team. And also, they've been stress testing Scorpio at 4K 60 using one of their benchmarks in the Forza 6 engine. So, what are the chances we're actually going to get a new Forza this holiday season? Well, I'm going to give this room an 80% rating because I believe that either we're going to get Forza 7 at 4K 60 frames per second, or if they can't achieve that, we'll get a re-release of Forza 6, like a deluxe edition, mastered in 4K, that will also run at 60 frames per second, and we'll get that this holiday season. But they can't just bring Forza, so what else could they bring us? So a lot of people are saying they might tease Halo 6 at 4K, 30 frames per second, something like that, in a trailer. But what I think is probably more likely, especially considering it is the anniversary of Halo 3, we might get a Halo 3 anniversary edition mastered in 4K 60 frames per second coming this holiday with Halo 6 beta access bundled in, which they've done things like this before, and I think it makes sense to have Halo at the Microsoft press conference. So I'm going to give that rating a 50% rating. Then Crackdown. So does Crackdown still exist? And can they now do that crazy physics without the use of the cloud? Seeing as the Xbox One Scorpio will have, 6 teraflops floating point performance, should allow it to run crazy physics at a decent frame rate without completely tanking the engine. So I'm actually going to give Crackdown a 60% rating. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about VR support for Scorpio. So despite Phil Spencer being quite cool on the subject of VR on Scorpio recently, I do believe they spent a lot of time and money investing into avenues there, and with the Xbox Scorpio basically being a Windows 10 PC at heart, it shouldn't be too hard to use either of the PC platforms on the Scorpio. So I think he's got that in his back pocket. He might be coming across cool because he's trying to save a big reveal for E3, or he might literally just be waiting to see how the market plays out. So as it stands, I'm going to give this VR support for Scorpio rating at 30%. So now let's move on to Sony. So a few things for Sony. I think Death Stranding, could it get a release date? Could we see another teaser followed by maybe a holiday 2018 or a blank 2019 release date? So I'm going to give that 60%. I think Sony's really clutching at a few games to try and get them brought forward so they can actually show a little bit more at E3. Because remember, they've got to give a decent amount of content for E3 and then also at PSX. So I think Death Stranding, you might get Kojima on stage, and I think you might get an estimated release date. If it is holiday 2018, I do expect it to be pushed back. If it's a blanket 2019, I think that's quite hittable, and I'll give the rating at about 60%. I think it's more likely than not. Then we move on to Red Dead 2. Obviously, that's just been delayed, and I don't think that's a tactic. I really do believe Rockstar wants to give that game more time. I think Sony want to put it on stage because, GTA 5 Online was really, really popular, and they want the extra early access for that. I'm actually going to give that rumour a 50% rating for now though, because Rockstar, they're not the biggest on E3 and they are quite cool on E3 in general, so missing E3 for them doesn't really make a difference because they can promote their games in other ways. Next, I'm going to talk about the PlayStation Vita presence. So last year it was relegated to just a footnote where they might mention it, but they wouldn't actually show any PlayStation Vita stuff. And I'm going to give it a 50% chance for a mention again, but again, I don't expect it to really be a focus for the company. Will there be a new handheld device shown at E3 this year? So there's been a lot of rumours saying that Sony has looked at what the Switch has done, and Nintendo were clearly quite worried that they might get ripped off with this idea, hence why they brought the console forwards. So I'm actually going to give this a 30% rating because I do feel like they are putting research and development into a new handheld, but I'm not sure whether they're actually going to pull the trigger on it. And if they did pull the trigger, I more expect that to come in PSX, because they're trying to really focus on their 3 main SKUs at the moment, which is PlayStation 4, PlayStation Pro, and PlayStation VR. So PlayStation VR presence at E3 is 100%. For me, Sony wants to give PlayStation VR a second holiday period to watch it move a few more million units, see if the game sales pick up a little bit, and then really give it a chance to flourish, because I don't think one holiday season's enough to tell whether something's going to need your full support in the future. So I think if PSVR does well this holiday, it will see a third year of support. If it doesn't do so well, it will probably be dropped sometime after. God of War, I also expect to be 100%, so I'm not going to talk too much on that. I think God of War will be a big part of the E3 press conference. Shenmue 3, I'm going to give it a 50%. I think they don't want people to forget about Shenmue 3 and the fact that they've poured millions of dollars into help support and bring that game to fruition. But I don't think it will necessarily be in a great showable state in time, because it does seem to like development is actually running quite long on that one. So then we're going to move on to Nintendo. I do expect there to be a Smash Bros. Deluxe Edition, similar to Mario Kart, where it's a re-release of the Wii U game with more characters, with more levels, with maybe a few more game modes. And I expect that to have a Q4 release date, and that's because it'll either hit holiday or it will be released after Christmas, maybe in that early springtime. And I do believe that to be about a 70% true rating on that one. As for SNES Classic Edition, obviously the NES Classic Edition sold really well, so it makes a lot of sense to have an SNES Classic Edition. But at the same time, Nintendo might not want to damage the online service they've got coming. Now, their online service has been announced to only contain NES games, and that might be because an SNES Classic is coming this holidays and they don't want to ruin the sales for that. But they also might be trying to balance the fact that SNES is coming in the future, and therefore they don't want to release a machine now. So I'm going to give that quite a high 80% rating to come true. Mario Rabbids RPG, I've seen the leaks for this, they seem really concrete. So I'm actually going to give that a 100% rating. I really do expect that to be there. As for a new Metroid, that's the big one for me. Could a new Metroid game be teased for 2018 release? There have been a few leaks, but they are coming from the developer on the interwebs. Retro Studios has kind of hinted that they might be working on a new Metroid for Nintendo. And I actually give this rating about 60%, because I think Nintendo will be pushing to get something shown at E3 because they see it as a really big boon for their hardcore audience. As far as Pokemon Stars go, there's been a lot of leaks here as well. A lot of the normal Nintendo industry insiders have said that they think Pokemon's coming for Switch. It'll be linked to Pokemon Sun and Moon. Maybe it'll be like the Monster Hunter XX, where you can transfer your data and stuff like that. And I actually give that about a 70% rating, because there are a lot of people confirming this one at the moment. As far as an Animal Crossing for Nintendo Switch, I think this will be possibly the Nintendo Switch's biggest seller. I really do mean that. I think the Switch is cut out perfectly for Animal Crossing. It's a really big selling franchise, and it's one that has grown momentum over a long period of time. And I think it could outsell the likes of Zelda and Mario quite easily when they release it. The reason I don't think it's necessarily that likely at the moment is that there are a mobile version of the game coming out. And when this happens, they usually tend to release the big main game some months after the mobile version, so it's probably not going to be present, so I'm going to give it a 20% rating. So as for Bethesda, they're once again going to do their own presentation. They don't have a lot of announced games to fill this yet from what I can see. So a new Wolfenstein, I'm going to give that an 80% rating. Doom did really well for them. It reviewed well, it sold well. And Wolfenstein The New Order also sold pretty well, making a decent profit. So I expect that to get an 80% rating. I think that's quite likely to be there at the press conference. As for Evil Within 2, Shinji Mikami has been quite quiet of recent. We haven't seen a lot from him, and he is obviously the director of the game series. And it also was a game that made a decent profit. It wasn't the biggest budget game, and it did actually manage to ship a couple of million units. And it seems the timing is quite consistent with what the timing schedule for a game like this would be. So I'm actually going to give this an 80% rating as well. I think they don't have a lot of announced titles, and I expect Wolfenstein and Evil Within 2 to actually be present at E3 this year. As for Ubisoft, I think Assassin's Creed Origins seems like 100% nailed on at this point. They need a big tentpole. I think this is it. The leaks seem pretty concrete. Beyond Good and Evil 2 is the one that all us fanboys would love to see. We want to see this Switch game in action. And I'm going to give it a 50-50 rating, based mostly on Nintendo. Nintendo might want to hold this back for maybe for a press conference of their own later in the future. Far Cry 5 seems to be 100% nailed on. The advertising campaign for that's already spinning up, which makes me think this could be a September or October release for them. And as for a new season of Rainbow Six Siege, I think this is a game that's taken a lot of people by surprise. It makes a large amount of money for Ubisoft on a monthly basis, and I think we could see a new season of content coming for Rainbow Six Siege, and I give that about a 70% rating to be shown at the press conference. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this E3 2017 rumour roundup. If you want me to keep bringing this content to you, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Cheers.